Hi, I'm Naomi Hall, and I'd like to welcome you to the Stress Management for Educators Virtual Summit. My whole goal with this summit is to provide you with powerful steps that you can take to reduce your stress and increase your quality time for yourself and your family. Because I know from experience when you are burned out and stressed, you just don't have that time and you can't see it. So, we have different experts with us in each interview. And today I have Edward Clemente with me, who is a creative disruptor and a change agent in all he does, and a firm believer in continuous learning. He has a degree in business management, which he earned when he was in Lisbon, and now he lives in Angola, where he is an executive director of a bank there. And he also has created his own project called Igniting Potential, where he acts as a business angel and mentor to entrepreneurs and startups with a goal of helping the entrepreneurial ecosystem to mature and to help create jobs in his country. He's also the author of How Attitude is Your Superpower. How to create incredible life changing success, which I'm really excited to hear about. So, Eduardo, welcome.
Thanks, Naomi. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello, everybody. Hope you enjoy the summit. And I hope I can be of some assistance and some help in the discussion.
I definitely think that you can. I love the title of your book and just how attitude is your superpower. And I know attitude and mindset is so important when we're dealing with stress. So, tell us a little bit about how a positive attitude can help educators with stress.
Thanks, Naomi. And I think the book also came a bit of that wanting to share some of these topics with the wider audience and the wider public. I think, for me, being positive helps everybody in general, but, focusing on teachers, I think there's always a lot of pressure because you are, dealing with a lot of different kids, mostly,
Mhm.
sometimes grown-ups, depending on what grades you're teaching and what type of teaching you're doing. And it's very impactful because you are, in a sense, shaping the future and the possibilities of all of those kids. And so I understand that it brings additional pressures, not just because of your day-to-day work, because of deadlines, things you need to deliver, the pressures from the public, the pressure from the students themselves, but also your internal pressures of what impact, what outcomes I'll deliver, right? And I think in most instances, we end up putting a lot of that pressure onto ourselves, which creates that stress. So that
Mm.
I think there's different types of stress and different levels of stress. And if there are some of those levels of types of stress that are a bit externally driven by other people, by external factors, things you might not even be in control of, you might influence some of them, others you might not even influence. But some of those stress is external, other stress is internal. Your expectations, the 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 weight of responsibility that you put on yourself on top of other people's expectations. And so when you think about being positive, I do really think it helps a lot with reducing at least the internal level of stress. And in some instance also the external, because when you work a little on your positivity, and sometimes you need to start faking it before it's real. You need to start pushing yourself to think positive about something, even if it's not your go-to reaction, if it's not natural for you. What happens a lot of the times, and I feel that, and I felt that in my career, is that if something happens or if there's a challenge, and I face that challenge, and my initial reaction to that challenge is, oh, this is extremely hard. This is going to put a lot of pressure on me. I don't know how I'm going to manage that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It will be difficult.
Mhm.
It will be challenging. And I will feel a lot more stress about it because I'm already thinking about the stress.
Mhm.
And in opposition, it might even be a bigger challenge or a bigger problem that I have to face. But if I start thinking in that instance, in the moment that that situation arises, and sometimes you don't even know how you're going to solve it, but in most cases it is, I don't know how, but I'm going to get this done. I
Mhm.
know I can do this. and I'll find a way of delivering or doing or, achieving the goal or the objective. And that positiveness that you put early on, first, I think it really reduces the pressure that you put onto yourself, because our mind, our brain is a very interesting machine. And the chemicals that you release in your brain also depend a lot of the thoughts and the approach that you take to things. So the more you think that you will be able to, that there is that there is a way. I'm going to find a way. I've done different problems before, and we've all done it. I mean, we've all had problems in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we failed in some, but we've achieved many successes in others. So if you focus on those, and a lot of the things that we might have been successful on, when that problem first arose or that situation first arrived, we didn't know exactly how we would solve it, right? So we would know we'll get there eventually. And I think that little thing of positivity, which is to start thinking that I'll find a way, I can do it, even if I don't do it alone, but I will find a solution for the problem. Mm-hmm. That takes, at least for me, I mean, I'm talking also about my own experience. Mm-hmm. I feel it reduces a lot of the stress of the what comes next, because what comes next then becomes a positive challenge of how am I going to solve it? I know I'm going to solve it. Let's just try and find how. Mm-hmm. Now, it might be a bit different when you're talking about external stress or external challenges where there's deadlines or there's people's expectations, etc. But I do tend to think that it works still. So if you still believe that you're going to find a way, that doesn't solve the problem. You still have the deadline. You still have, the responsibility to comply with whatever request or demand or goal is putting in front of you. But the way you approach the person on the other side is also that. And you might actually find it that is quite profitable for you to be honest and say to the person, okay, I don't know exactly how, but I'll get it done and I'll find a way to do this. And that becomes positive for both. So the other person now knows you don't know the answer, but you're gonna apply yourself to that. So it reduces pressure on both sides of the conversation. Mm-hmm. But most of it for me is it's hard to put it in words, but it's kind of a feel that you create for yourself. So when you come to a situation and you start thinking negatively about it, it's like your whole mind and your whole body closes itself into that negative space. You become kind of more somber. Even your facial expressions become more serious, and you're kind of really concentrated and in a dark kind of space. Like, I don't know, I'm going to do this. I'm stressing over this. I need to do this. I need to do that. I haven't found an answer, and that just kind of piles on top of itself, and it kind of it's like a rolling ball that is going to increase. But the same effect is true with positivity, because it becomes lighter, and the more lighter you are, the less stressed you are, and the more cognitive capability you kind of have. The more positive you are, the easier it is for you to come up with new solutions. And the brain releases cortisol when you're under stress. Mm-hmm. And that's why, being positive is also a trick to reduce the levels of cortisol, because if you're thinking positively about these things, you release less of that particular chemic, but also you start seeing the benefits because your ideas start to come up and you're not as worried. So because the ideas are coming up, you're now seeing ways of solving the problem. So it both of the sides are self-fulfilling prophecies. It seems very cliche or very, kind of pink idea that being positive solves stuff. I don't have the data with me now, but I've read a lot of books on neuroscience, and there are actually studies done in universities that do show the difference in productivity and stress reduction of being positive, having a positive approach to things. So it does work. I think it requires some if it's not natural to you, I mean, there's people that naturally are very positive all the time.
Mm.
There's whose natural disposition is to be a bit more concerned or a bit more negative about things, and they always see the problems or what things might not work. And if you're on that, on that side of the scale, you need to work on this a little bit. You need to be mindful of whenever something comes up, let me think about what the positive things are. Let me know that I've done problems in the past. I've solved stuff. I've managed to complete projects within the deadline. I've managed to comply with someone else's expectations. I've delivered to my own expectations. I've made an impact, for a teacher, for example. How many kids have you impacted positively? And I'm sure there's a lot of them.
Mm.
There's always good examples and bad examples. And if you focus on the good ones and you see the positive impact that you can create, I think it creates, a spiral positivity. And, with time, it becomes more natural. And you actually don't need to be as mindful about it
Mm.
to put it as something that you need to think of. It just becomes an habit. And I do feel that it helped me a lot, although I'm not a teacher, but even in my career, it reduced a lot of that stress. I think we're all under stress, right?
Mhm.
But when you see stress as a challenge, I'm stressed because I'm doing something new or I'm doing something important and I want to create that impact, is different than I'm under stress because this is very difficult and I'm under stress because I might fail. It's two different sides of how you can see the same situation, right? So I think that positivity is really one key tool that we can work on ourselves, and we can have the help of others. It's like the buddy system, right? If you tell this to someone and say, if you're seeing me being negative, force me to, explain to you
Mhm.
positive things about it, or
Mhm.
other things I've done in the past that were successful. Force me into going into the positive side, and your colleague, your friend, your family can help you in that process. I think is really a powerful tool for us to have in our arsenal.
Mm. That's so powerful and right in line with some of the things that I've been coming across recently of just the power of your words and what you're saying to yourself. And I love how you framed stress as a challenge because I just literally I did a post this morning on my Instagram about what you say is your truth, like you were just saying. Like if I view it as hard and difficult and I don't know what I'm going to do, that is how I'm going to act. But I'm a martial artist and there's so many like I'm constantly learning new things and they're hard to do. But if I choose my words carefully, I'm more able to learn them. And if I and the words I chose the words that you just used, I view it this is challenging, but I'm going to learn how to do it. And I approach it totally differently than when I'm like, oh, this is so hard, I hate it.
Exactly. It's like your whole disposition immediately changes because
Mhm.
of that frame that you apply. And our mind body connection is very strong. So
Mm.
the mind and the body, they help each other adjust to whatever you want. So the same way you are applying it,
Mhm.
words to body, your
Mhm.
words are impacting your body's ability to do something, and you
Mhm.
make it easier because you're framing the words. But it's like if you're not having a good day and you force yourself to smile,
Mhm.
your body doesn't necessarily know you're forcing it. So you end up releasing some of the chemicals that you would naturally release by a normal smile, a natural
Mhm.
smile. So you kind of trick your body into being happier just
Mhm.
because you forced yourself to smile. So it is there's a lot of books and things you can read about these interesting topics. But what I found interesting is that I think many years ago I thought this was just conversation to sell books, or
Mhm.
for people to sell consultancy projects, and this was all
Mhm.
very pinkish view of the world. But
Mhm.
there's so many proofs of it working, so many cases, examples in studies that you end up having to say, okay, this is something, this really exists. And once you realize it exists, and that is more science than myth, then you can start applying it and using those little tweaks. And so I find it very positive and very powerful as well.
Yeah, I love the science that we're finding behind all of this. So you also use prioritization to help yourself with stress. So can you tell us kind of how does that work? Because you work in a stressful environment yourself. You're not an educator necessarily in a school system, but you're working in a banking system that's high stress. And you are an educator in a way because you are presenting and sharing this information with people. So how does prioritization help you with stress?
Yes, I think I found it more useful recently, probably in the last 4 years, especially when I started my project of mentoring
Mhm.
to create time for that. So when I created that project, my first reaction is I'm creating stress for myself. I'm putting another thing on top of something that I'm already doing.
Mhm.
Now, how am I going to manage this? And then I thought, you need to be positive about this. So you're going to find a way. If you
Mhm.
want to do this, you're going to find a way. And if you want that something, if 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 there are a few things in your day to day, in your month to month, certain things that are periodic or certain things in your calendar or in your to-do list or in your goals that are really important, I find it very important to create time for those.
Mhm.
I block parts of my schedule for those things that are relevant. And then I'm very adamant that unless it's an emergency, something really urgent or important, I don't switch those blocks of time for other things. So, for example, I'm working, and because we did this conversation a few weeks ago, and I knew I was going to have this, and this is important for me to be able to share, I blocked space in my calendar. And in the last 3 weeks, I've rejected all meetings that came that were proposed for this time
Mhm.
because it was something that I wanted to do. And once you that just that little thing reduces the stress because you know you're going to be dedicated to that issue at that point in time.
Mhm.
So specifically, if your stress comes of a lot of things to do or a lot of different things to manage, or managing family and work, or friends and family and work. So I block stuff on my calendar, even to exercise or
Mhm.
to read, to because at least my brain knows those things are scheduled for. So
Mhm.
the brain is also funny that way. If you have stuff that isn't closed in your brain or work that is pending, your brain is kind of always reminding you of that. So it's not closed, and your brain knows it's not closed. It's always bringing it up. You're always thinking of it. But if you write it down, saying I'm going to do this that day, then you don't have that reminder all the time. For your brain, that's already solved. You're going to tackle that in a specific time. You're going to do that then. And the fact that you don't have those, you know, thoughts coming to your mind all the time of, oh, I need to do this, oh, I need to close that, oh, I need to find time for that, or I need to make that call, or I need to talk to someone. If you put it in your schedule, or make even a to-do list sometimes help,
Mhm.
but usually to-do lists, they're very dynamic because you keep adding stuff without
Mhm.
taking things off. So I don't think it works as well. For me, that the prioritization is what really helps with today. There's a block of time I need to dedicate to this. This is really important for me. I'm really needing to close this. Even if it's 15, 20, 30 minutes, I'm going to have to block this and I'm going to deal with that there. Doesn't work 100% of the time. It's not perfect.
Right.
Sometimes I do slip also, or, a meeting overruns,
Mhm.
or there's a conversation that becomes important that you need to have it. And sometimes there are deviations. But I think that if you create a little bit of that time for those things, at least it reduces the stress of you having to think about when you're going to solve it.
Mhm.
There's already a block in which you're going to think about those. And then it's also about saying yes and saying no. So you need to say yes more often to projects that you like or to things that really energize you, because when you do something that gives you energy, things that are connected to your purpose,
Mhm.
even if your agenda or your schedule is packed, that will energize you. And whatever energizes you makes you more positive. Also, it helps you reduce stress. You're doing something you like, you're doing something that you enjoy. Even if you're tired, but you come out of that work or talk or lecture, you come out of it filled with energy because it was something that was really deeply connected to your purpose. So you need to find yes time for those things. You need to say certain yeses to yourself or to others when it relates to things that you know will make you feel better.
Mhm.
But it also comes to saying no a lot because I don't know the teaching world as much, but I assume that there are some similarities with my world in which there's a lot of different requests and a lot of people ask for urgent things. This
Mm,
conversation is urgent. This
for
request
sure.
is urgent. This report is urgent. This meeting is urgent. And they're not all urgent. Some of them might be, but urgent is the new normal because everything is urgent, and if everything's urgent, then nothing's urgent. So it does force you in a way to pick what you need to say no to. I can't do this today. I need to block this time. So if something else comes up, I will have to say no to someone else. And of course, that there's an exercise that you need to do about that because if you start saying no a lot in a bad way, you start closing doors with other people, which is hard to manage. So
Mm,
it's important that you position the no in a way that adds value. It's either
mm,
no, I can't do it now, but if it's really urgent, you can talk to people to this. I'm going to give you a name of 2 or 3 people that can help you with that.
mhm,
Or I can delegate to someone in my team, which will help you achieve the same result. Or I can't today, but I can tomorrow at this time. Can you make it? So give an alternative. Don't just, oh no, I'm too busy. I can't do it. Because that also creates stress for you because we don't like, usually, most people don't like to be the bad guys in the conversation. So you want to please in a way. And if you find a plan B for the other person in a way, you don't see yourself as negative. You don't see yourself as being a bad colleague or a bad employee because you're
mhm,
providing alternatives, but at the same time, you're focusing on what you need to do. And I think all of these things help reduce that stress because you manage your own time. And if you're managing your own time, there's less stress factors that come from outside because you're a little more under control
mhm,
of what you're going to do and when and by when and with whom. So you can control these things a bit better. For me, it really helped start putting things in the schedule. Sometimes there's problems. If it's not in my schedule, it doesn't exist. And sometimes it's my fault because I forgot to put it there. And then someone else books something and I completely forgot that I was supposed to do something because I forgot it, but that's not frequent. So in most days, having my schedule, and bookings things and creating that organization for myself reduces the stress because whenever I need to see what I need to do, I go to my schedule and I know I have this and I have that, and I'm going to dedicate time for this here. It's already done. No more questions about what is it that I'm going to do, what am I going to prioritize. So in a way, it's more of a trick or a tool
mhm,
to help you spend less energy thinking about when are you going to solve things. You
mhm,
just write it there, put a schedule, put a date, take it off your mind, and you start spending less energy focusing on the things that you still have pending. So
mhm,
I, I'm not sure if it works for everybody, right?
mhm,
I found it useful for me, very useful. It's something that I've also read in other books
mhm,
about managing time and how best to focus yourself into arranging your priorities in the day. Like you can't keep just 30 minutes for something that is really priority. I mean, either you do it early on if you're a morning person and morning is my time. So let's just start the day and close the things that are really important. Or if you're a night person, when people leave the office, you block like 30, 40 minutes, an hour, and I'm going to dedicate this hour, and this is what I'm going to do my presentation or my report, or this is when I'm going to organize my next lecture. Even, for example, in my case, that's what I do. If I have to make a presentation, which it's not the case today because this is a conversation, but if I had to present something,
mhm,
I know what time of the day I prefer to do it. Usually for me, it's the end of the day.
mhm,
And I block that time and I make this presentation this slot. And then I know that time I'm focused. And I think that really helps. Otherwise, what I felt before was the entire week, it would be on my mind, I need to do the presentation. I need to find time to do the presentation. Oh, I didn't have time today. I'll find time tomorrow. And then the time never comes. And so once you start creating those little organizations, those little tricks to help you reduce those, not just stress, but also energy that you spend, it becomes more fluid. And when
Mhm.
it becomes more fluid, it becomes easier to manage. And if it's easier to manage, it creates less stress. So that's kind of what I felt.
Yeah, I love that. And it's one of those, I think it seems like it can take more of your time because you're trying to figure out where you're going to put things, but it actually saves you time because you're not spending all this time trying to figure out, like you said, when you're going to do these things. And I love that you said you need to say yes more because we talk so much about say no, you need to say no more. But I love that you need to say yes to those things that fill you up, that give you energy. Like I think we get so focused on the saying no that we forget that we need to say yes to those things that we love, that we enjoy, that fill us up. And um, I love that. Say yes more to those things. Um, you're right. Like those things give you
Yeah,
energy.
it's I think it's very important, Naomi, because what you need to say no to certain things so that you can say yes to the things that really matter,
Hmm.
rather than letting all the small things that always come your way, because nature abhors the vacuum and emptiness.
Hmm.
So if you keep your calendar empty, someone will fill it for you.
Yeah.
So might as well be you. You
Hmm.
choose what you need to do. You choose what you want to do and what really matters to you. And if it's filled, people will find the next empty slot. If it's empty, they will start filling it up. So
Yeah.
saying no will help you say yes
Hmm.
to things that will kind of help you gain energy and do things that are related to your purpose. But also, if you're looking for, a new project, doing something you never done before, say yes to that and make the time to think about how I'm going to be a part of it. I
Yeah.
find it really interesting.
Yeah. And I love that you also say like with saying no, say it in a positive way, give an alternative. I think as teachers, part of the struggle is we hate saying no because we're such helpers and givers that we feel horrible when we can't help someone. But being able to give them alternatives like, no, I can't do it today, but I could do it here just takes, like you said, it just takes some of that stress off in saying the no of I gave them an alternative. I didn't just turn them away empty-handed. I gave them a person to go to. I gave them a different time slot. I gave them what I could offer them at the time. So I think that really helps with the no too. So you also
Yeah,
talk
and
a bit
I'm
of, oh, go ahead.
not sorry. I was just gonna say a
Mhm.
very quick thing. So I'm not a teacher, so I'm not sure if this is something that is doable.
Mhm.
But like in my job, sometimes is people come to you looking for an answer.
Mhm.
And if you're a teacher, I assume that also happens with the students.
Yeah.
And sometimes the easiest way to say no quickly is asking them to try and solve it themselves, giving them a clue about where they can look for it,
Mhm.
or who to talk, or Google it, or look at book X and tell me what you think, and come back next tomorrow or in 2 days. Come back to me, and after reading that, tell me what you think. Kind of pass it back to
Mhm.
whoever is asking sometimes is also an interesting approach. It's probably a little closer to the coaching methodology of
Mhm.
working through questions, which is not always possible to do, but sometimes is another thing you can try and do.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Having them, I taught making them take their monkeys with them. I'm like, it's not my monkey, it's not my circus. So I'm gonna give you some direction to take your monkeys back with you, and you're gonna get your monkeys under control.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I like that. I'm gonna steal that.
it's a good one. I stole it from somebody else, so you're welcome to steal. You also talk about adaptation being important in dealing with stress. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's a different type of stress, I think. So, like I said, I think there's different levels and types of stress.
Mhm.
And another one that I think we all face, I think today more than any other times of our lives, is the stress of change. Things are changing, technology is changing things, and if I think of teaching, it's probably an area where everybody's panicking about what AI can do, about information being widely available in the internet, about chat GPT, all of these things. What's going to happen with our profession? What's going to happen with how we teach? Which in my job it is the same way. It's been said that in banking there's very few jobs that can't be automated. So um, we do tend to think that I'm not sure how long I'm going to have a job doing exactly what I'm doing now. So that is another type of stress that comes from change. And that's where I think adaptation helps, and working a bit on that is the more you start expanding your horizons, the more. So I'm a firm believer, not in everything, of course. So if you're like a surgeon, that's not the case. But in most things in life, if you're a generalist, you can make it quite well being a generalist rather than being a specialist. There's of course different roles and different jobs where people do need to be specialists. And probably those are the ones that are going to be harder to automate or harder to replace, at least in the short time. But the other roles, if you're a generalist, you open your doors, you open yourself to more opportunities into the world. So if I think my job is at risk, and let's say I'm an accountant, and I'm in this firm, and technology is coming, and it's changing my role, rather than just focusing on my debits and credits and being the best accountant and the best expert, maybe it's best for me is if I start adapting to what's happening around me, and not just embrace the technology, but start studying it. And rather than thinking that if my career as an accountant ends in this company, I need to go and look for an accounting job in another firm, maybe I should learn to code. And then I could go to an accounting firm, but not just necessarily to be an accountant, but to help them automate or to help them manage the software that is going to do what I was doing before. Oh, and that can be seen as a career thing. Like that's what I want to move next to. So I want to move to a career that has a longer plan, and I need to start adapting to it. Or it might simply be because you're curious and you work on that curiosity and you like to know what's happening and you read about different things and you do online training on different topics. I find that quite powerful. I find it is really good to know a little about a lot of different subjects, because just even if you find someone and you're having a conversation in a conference, in a coffee shop, in a networking event, and that person is talking about that subject, you can be part of the conversation. You're not an expert. You have a broader idea of what that is, but you can share your views and your ideas. And so I think that if all of us work on being more curious and then using that curiosity to work on how we can adapt to different things, might be a hobby, might be doing something different with your kids, might be opening your mind to doing something different rather than calling someone, doing a voice message, which is the trend now, discovering with my daughter. I text, she talks back. So try it, adapt, try it as well and see how well it works. So I think that the power is that if you start putting yourself out there, being curious, learning different things, reading about different things, putting your hand up to be part of a project that you know nothing about, and being in the middle of it, seeing it happen, seeing it evolve, you're going to learn. You're going to learn a lot. And that reduces the pressure that in the future, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So I think that from early on in our lives, we get ingrained with this idea that we are what we do. And that's, I think, very, I've read this somewhere that when people are asked, so who are you, Naomi? And most of us, or who are you, Eduardo? Most of us would respond to, oh, I'm an executive at this bank, or I'm an accountant, or I'm an engineer. Well, that's not who you are. That's what you do. It's very different. And you can do different things, but you're always going to be you. So I can stop being the CFO and start being an engineer, or I can stop being a dentist and open a bar, but I'm still me.
Mhm.
And that connection in our brain is so strong. There was a study in the UK that showed that some people took longer to recover from losing their jobs than they did from losing a family member that died, which is odd.
Yeah.
Or, they took longer from recovering from a job loss than from a divorce, for example, because it's something that is so ingrained in who they are that most people feel that if I lost this, now I don't know what I am or my value. Or so if you open yourself up and if you learn and read and put yourself into different projects or different initiatives, then your horizon broadens a little bit, and you can be one of those parts that fit into different positions. It's
Hmm.
it's like in sports, that there's players that can only play in one position.
Hmm.
There are players that can play in three or four, and most teams do value the players that can play in different spots. It's like the small Lego pieces are more useful than the longer ones because you can use them in different stuff. So it's like finding different spaces where you can blossom a little bit,
Hmm.
which again is driven by cultivating your curiosity, learning, keep learning, and learn different things,
Hmm.
even if it's something that you know nothing about. Put yourself out there, read stuff, read different books. But then, even in a work environment, um, when there's something new and they're looking for a team for that project, it might be something you've never done before, but put your hand up and say, I'm willing to be a part of it. Be honest again about your capabilities and say, I want to be a part of it. I don't know nothing about this, but I want to be a part of it and I want to help and I want to find ways of contributing and also learning. And then you can manage expectations a little bit. But I find that adaptation is probably one of the most important skills in the next, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, because of all the changes that are coming. Cultivating this skill, working on it, can be so beneficial for us. And once you come to this point that you think to yourself, there's so much things I can do. And even if I don't know it now, I learn and I'll find a way of getting there. So it's the positivity combined with the adaptation, which kind of, in if you look at it all combined, it is probably the definition of the growth mindset, right?
Hmm.
That I can learn, I can evolve. And if you start positioning things like this, the change that can come, you face it with much less stress. In some cases, I've seen people that actually start wanting the change because they want to move to something else.
Hmm.
They're starting to look for their own change. And so I feel it reduces your stress quite significantly.
Wow, yeah, that does all connect. And I love the focus you put on who am I versus what do I do? Um, because yeah, like in education, like when we introduce ourselves, I'm a teacher. And but you're right, that's what I do. That's not who I am. And I personally experienced this of when I lost my job, like you said, like I struggled so much when I lost my job because my identity was in my job. And I didn't know who I was without that. And so having done some of that work of who am I aside from my career, it's not as hard when things change. It's not as hard to accept that those transitions, because it's not my identity. It's not who I am, and so separating those
Yeah.
is so important. Um, in this whole, and growth mindset, I love that you brought that up as well because we teach growth mindset to our kids, but I think we forget that we need that growth mindset too. We need to turn it back to ourselves of I need to be learning, growing, adapting, using that positive language with myself and not just my students of I can do this. I can figure out a solution. I've been through hard things. I've been through changes. I'll make it through the next change. We'll make it through the next, we made it through all of the transitions in education with COVID. We'll make it through AI. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out how this is going to work in our classrooms. So I think that's really important. You also talk about resilience. So tell me a little bit about the factor that that plays.
Yeah, I think it links quite well that question of resilience with what we were just saying, because when you do something new or when you try something, sometimes it will fail.
Mhm.
Sometimes you won't get the wanted result. And I think it's really, really important for us to do two things. First, to not evaluate ourselves through the result of one or two initiatives. Our value is not the value of the outcome of one project or two. It is our intrinsic value that we know certain things, we have certain skills, we can do certain things. It won't work 100% of the time. So don't become negative because you failed once, right? I actually in the book, I think I use the example of basketball, right? Even the best players shooting 3-pointers, they hardly go above, 35, 36% completed shots. So that means they fail at least 6 in every 10. They keep at it. And they do 40%, if they do 40%, which is probably the record, they're the best players in the world. And that means they're failing more than succeeding, but they're still the best. So it depends also on it's also depends on the job, on the role, on whatever it is you're doing. Certain roles have less appetite for failure, others are more innovative and you can explore more. But failure is part of life, and you won't succeed 100% of the time. Nobody's perfect. The really important part of resilience is don't take that as a measure that you're not good. Don't take that as a measure to become negative rather than positive, and tackle that as a learning thing. Okay, I failed here. Well, why? Okay, what didn't go as well? What can I do different next time? Right? I think a good example of that are serial entrepreneurs. There's these people that have entrepreneurial, I don't know, blood or mindset. I don't even know what it is, but they try once, they fail, they try again, they fail, they try the third time, they fail, they try the fourth time. Suddenly it's a unicorn and it's valued at $1 billion. And then everybody talks about them.
Yeah.
But it started with the other learning
Mhm.
curves. It started with the other projects that didn't go so well. But if they weren't resilient, at the second or third time, they might have said, okay, this is probably not for me. I can't do this.
Mhm.
And so if you're not learning, that's bad. But if you're learning with those failures, then you're evolving, and it's part of what it is. It's part of the evolution. But another thing that I think is important about resilience is that you need to see failure um, so when you fail or when you think you failed, you're looking at the outcome, and we very rarely look at the process.
Mm.
So like, for example, I've read this in Annie Duke's book, and I've also played poker before. So I also took some learnings from poker, but Annie's book is amazing on this, and she says that poker players are faced with decisions very quickly. And what those decisions have of good is that your feedback is immediate.
Mm.
The play ends every 2 or 3 minutes. You're finishing a play, starting a new one, finishing a play, starting a new one. So there's feedback loops every 2 to 3 minutes,
Mm.
sometimes even quicker. But what that creates is either good or bad, depends on how you tackle it. But if you have a process and I'm applying a process, and usually this process outcome is more good than bad,
Mm.
then your outcome is not your failure. Your failure is if you don't follow the process. Because even if you follow that process, sometimes you will lose. You will lose with that process, but most times you will win. But if suddenly you start seeing other people playing differently. And you decide, oh, okay, if everybody's playing that way, I'm going to play that way too and see if I can succeed. Then you're destroying the process and your chances of success reduce because now it's up to chance. There's no strategy anymore. There's no math behind it. There's no probabilities that you're putting in place. And then you're opening yourself up to taking the wrong decision based on the outcome rather than the evaluation of the process. And I think we do that a lot to ourselves. Rather than seeing what process of decision did I go through, what things have I done. Usually, will this make me successful? Or I've been using this for so long and it keeps failing, so maybe I need to adjust. It's like another good example is you can cross red lights in your car every day and never had an accident. And you say to other people, oh no, you're just dumb. You can just go and cross the red lights and nothing will happen to you. I've done that all the time. That's luck. It's not the process. I mean, the process worked forever, and whenever it fails, it can be disastrous. But I think we tend to evaluate our success or not more via the outcome. And if we think about the process, sometimes we conclude that we didn't fail. It's just a normal part of the process. It won't work 100% of the time. And so I'm within the normal outcome. And that ends up reducing your stress because this is part of the process. I know if I take 10 decisions every day, I won't get all of them right. If I get 7 of 10, probably I'm above average. Right. So that helps reduce the stress. And then, like I was saying before, if you see it as part of your evolution, if you take some of those failures as learnings, also you reduce that stress because that failure is not, oh, I'm such a failure. That failure becomes part of what I'm learning to do better next time. And I think it links also to the positivity. It's easier to be resilient when you adopt a positive mindset because you're seeing it through a positive lens rather than a negative lens of the failure necessarily. And I guess, for example, with teachers, if you use this method with your students, and in a class of 20, there's 15 or 17 that really take really good outcomes of that process, I'm not sure you should change it because there's 2 or 3 that, don't make it. Because if you change the process entirely, you can be good for those 3 or 4, then will it be still as good for the other, 15, 16? It is evaluating the process that sometimes I think we don't take enough time to do. And that's a very hard thing. I'm talking about it, but I don't do it every time because it's so automatic that you look at the outcome and I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. And then if you really start thinking back, you start thinking, no, with the information I had at that time, with what was available, I would still have made the same choice. And so it wasn't a failure. I just need to pay attention to the process and see, should I gather more information? What should I bring other people to the conversation before making that call next time? So I think if you start seeing it from those perspectives, it ends up reducing the stress that you put in yourself because of certain failures. Because failures are part of life. I mean, if we would given up on our first driving lesson, none of us would know how to drive because we couldn't drive in the first one. At least I couldn't. And so it's not giving up, it's continuing, going for it, going at it, and we'll get there.
I love that. And I think we can really apply that to because testing, at least here in the US, is so high stakes. We put so much into it, but that's just one part of what we do and one outcome. And our kids may not get where we want them to be, but when we take the time to step back and look at the process that we've gone through with our kids throughout the year and see maybe they're not where we want them to be, but they're definitely not where they started either. We've made progress in that process. So you're right, like looking at your process of, did I have a good process? Am I or are my students somewhere beyond where they started? Well, that's some level of success there. I didn't completely fail. So yeah, that gives such great perspective. And I think even in like, because we set goals and different things, and you don't always hit your goal, but you're not the same person that started toward that goal. You've made progress, you've changed. So I love how everything that you've shared just connects with like that positive mindset and setting your priorities and that conversation that you're having with yourself and the growth mindset and looking at the process. All of that just connects so well. Now, you also have a free gift for our audience. So, can you tell them a little bit about that?
Sure. So it would be very hard to give you all the physical book. So what I've done is I made the PDF of the book available, and it's not a very big book, so you can read it in 1 or 2 days. And I hope you enjoy it and take some lessons out of it. I hope it is an interesting reading, and I've tried to write it a little kind of like also like this conversation.
Mm,
That's my intended voice in the book, is like I'm doing certain type of mentoring or I'm having a conversation with
mhm,
someone. So it's not a very dense or complex book. I'm not going for a literary award. It was a conversation put into a book. So I hope it's light and that in some way it gives you some kind of ideas or tools to navigate your profession a bit better, to reduce your stress, to be more positive. And I'm very happy to share the PDF and make it available to you that are part of this, and hope you enjoy it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have a link for that for all of you, and I'm excited to read this. Yeah, I can't wait to read it and to share it with all of you. So I want to thank all of you who watched today. This is just one of the interviews that's part of this summit, and actually, it's turned into an international summit because we have speakers in Angola, Africa. We have speakers in the UK. We have speakers in the US. So it's exciting to hear from people around the world helping us with stress, providing tools to you to add to your toolbox. So, if this is the first interview you're watching, please catch the other ones. We have some great tools for you to help you with your stress that are practical, like what you heard today, of just working on your mindset and your positivity to help change the direction that you're headed and to change your level of stress. And Eduardo, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
No, thank you, Naomi, for reaching out, for allowing me to share all of these with you and all your audience. And I'm really honored by the chance. So thank you very much. And I hope it was interesting for you and all the people attending the summit.
It was. Thank you so much. So, thank you for watching. Thank you, Eduardo. And I hope you all have a fantastic day.
Thank you.